Number 1. Honesty and literal precision. One of the most recognizable strengths in many autistic people is how direct and straightforward their communication is. There's no hidden meaning, no guessing game, no, I said this but I meant that. When someone with autism tells you something, they usually mean exactly the words they say. It's simple, clear, and refreshingly efficient. This kind of literal precision can feel like a superpower in a world built on ambiguity. Plenty of autistic adults say they realized later in life how much neurotypical communication depends on reading tone, implied meaning, or subtle cues. Meanwhile, their own style is built on honesty and accuracy. If a question is asked, they answer it. If something doesn't make sense, they call it out. If a plan is unclear, they want it spelled out properly. In practical situations, this becomes incredibly useful. Workplaces rely on people who communicate exactly what they need, and autistic employees tend to excel in roles where accuracy and transparency, or structured feedback, matter. Law, engineering, editing, programming, logistics, research, fields that punish ambiguity, often fit naturally within this communication style. A classic example is Temple Grandin, one of the most well-known autistic thinkers. She often talks about how literal thinking helped her solve engineering problems by stripping away assumptions and sticking to the real mechanics of how things work. This trait also makes autistic people less likely to manipulate or lie in subtle ways. Studies show they're generally more truthful. So while it may not look like a cinematic superpower, this combination of clarity, truthfulness, and exact meaning is something many people wish they had, and autistic people often have naturally. Number 2. Absorption in deep learning. Many autistic people develop intense, long-term interests that go far beyond hobbies. When something clicks with their brain, trains, insects, coding, history, animation, geology, you name it, the curiosity doesn't fade after a week. It builds. The mind locks onto a topic and starts gathering information with a kind of precision and hunger that can last months, years, or even a lifetime. This is why so many autistic adults describe their special interests as the thing that defines them the most. And not in a casual way. They can explain the entire evolution of a video game engine, list every type of medieval sword by region, or recall the release year of every spacecraft ever launched. It isn't obsessive for the sake of being obsessive. The brain just works better when focusing deeply instead of spreading attention thin. You'll see this studied in research too. Autistic learners often absorb information faster in domains aligned with their interests. That's why many self-taught programmers, animators, musicians, and technicians in online communities turn out to be autistic. They didn't learn the skill slowly over time. They dove in and became good because their brains stayed locked in the learning mode. One real-world example is Satoshi Tajiri, the creator of Pokemon. As a kid, he spent years studying insects with near scientific dedication. That deep interest eventually became the foundation for one of the world's biggest media franchises. This ability to absorb knowledge isn't just being really into something. It's being able to build a deep, expert-level understanding without needing external motivation. Number 3. Hyperfocus. Hyperfocus is what happens when an autistic brain locks onto a task so tightly that everything else drops out of awareness. It's not just concentration. It's a state where distractions barely register. Hours can pass without the person noticing, because the brain stays fully inside whatever they're doing. This can happen with work, creative projects, games, research, solving a puzzle, or anything that's mentally stimulating. During hyperfocus, the usual mental noise disappears. Many autistic people describe it as finally being able to use their brain at full power, instead of constantly fighting sensory overload or social demands. In practical terms, hyperfocus can lead to massive productivity. Someone might write hundreds of lines of code in a single sitting, finish entire chapters of a book they're working on. Tasks that would take others multiple sessions sometimes get finished in one sustained burst. Many biographers argue that people like Nikola Tesla or Isaac Newton showed signs of extreme focus, often working through nights without breaking attention. Hyperfocus comes with trade-offs. Switching tasks is harder, and interruptions feel painful. But when the conditions are right, it's one of the most powerful cognitive modes a human brain can enter. Number 4. Pattern recognition. A lot of autistic people naturally notice patterns that most people never pick up. It could be visual, tiny differences in shapes, layouts, symbols, or movements. It can be auditory, specific rhythms, repeated sounds, or slight changes in tone. This isn't about being good at puzzles. It's about the brain automatically searching for structure. When information comes in, the autistic brain often organizes it into rules, patterns, or connections without effort. That's why many autistic people excel in fields like coding, math, linguistics, engineering, or music. They see patterns as clearly as other people see images. Some autistic musicians can hear a song once and immediately pick out repeating structures or unusual chord changes. Some autistic programmers instantly see where a mistake in a long string of code is hiding. Others notice visual symmetry or errors that escape everyone else in the room. One example often discussed is Daniel Tammet, an autistic savant known for his extraordinary ability to recognize and manipulate numerical patterns. But this kind of pattern perception also shows up in everyday people who aren't savants. Instead of reading facial expressions easily, autistic people sometimes rely on learned patterns of behavior, noticing routines, repeated phrases, or predictable actions. It's a quiet superpower, but in many fields, seeing what others don't is one of the most valuable skills someone can have. Number 5. Sensory supersensitivity. Many autistic people experience the world with sharper sensory input than the average person. Sounds can be louder, lights brighter, textures more noticeable, smells stronger, and tiny visual details harder to ignore. While this sensitivity can be overwhelming or painful in chaotic environments, it can also turn into a real advantage in the right context. Someone with heightened hearing might pick up faint electronic hums, distant footsteps, or subtle differences in pitch. In music production, this can translate to an unusually precise ear, the ability to detect tiny tuning issues or background noises others never catch. Visual sensitivity can mean noticing extremely small changes in an environment, a shifted object, an inconsistency in design, or a hidden flaw in a product. That's why some autistic people thrive in crafts, art restoration, animation, quality control, or technical inspection work. Some autistic people even develop detailed sensory maps, remembering how places look, sound, or feel with extreme accuracy. Of course, sensory overload is the flip side, but the heightened perception itself can be incredibly functional. Number 6. Incredible memory abilities. A noticeable number of autistic people have memory abilities that go far beyond the average range. It isn't always photographic memory, but it often looks close, especially with details most people forget almost instantly. This can show up in several different forms. Some have extreme strong episodic memory, meaning they remember events from years ago with exact wording, locations, or sequences. Others have visual memory, recalling layouts, images, or pages of text with surprising accuracy. A lot of autistic adults describe remembering conversations from childhood almost word for word. This is part of why many autistic people excel in fields where details matter: history, editing, software development, science, and anything involving large amounts of stored knowledge. There are well-documented extreme examples like Kim Peek, who inspired the character in Rain Man, and who could memorize entire books in a matter of hours. But memory strengths don't have to be a savant level to be impressive. Many autistic students and professionals naturally retain what they learn, even after years without revisiting the topic. Some research suggests this comes from how autistic brains process information. They tend to store details first and general concepts afterward, the opposite of how neurotypical memory usually works. This means small pieces of information don't get lost in the shuffle. The result is a reliable, detailed memory that stays accurate long after most people forget. Not supernatural, but definitely a powerful advantage in day-to-day life. Number 7. Nonlinear logic. A lot of autistic people think in ways that don't follow the usual step 1, step 2, step 3 pattern. Their brains jump between ideas differently, not randomly but through connections that aren't obvious to most people. This nonlinear style often leads to solutions or perspectives that seem unconventional but end up being more efficient or more interesting. In creative fields, this can show up as original artwork, unique humor, or storytelling that doesn't follow predictable formulas. Some autistic artists describe seeing entire concepts at once, shapes, structures, or visual patterns, and then turning those into drawings, animations, or designs that stand out because they weren't built from a template. In technical fields, nonlinear logic can produce insights most people wouldn't reach. For example, autistic engineers sometimes solve mechanical problems by noticing relationships between parts that don't seem connected at first glance. There are well-known figures often discussed in this context. Temple Grandin, for instance, describes herself as a visual thinker who solves engineering problems by mentally simulating machines in motion. This kind of cognition doesn't always fit neatly into standard schooling or workplace expectations, but when someone's allowed to think in their natural style, the results can be genuinely breakthrough. Number 8. Savant-level islands of genius. This is the rarest and most extreme form of autistic strength, the kind that looks almost unreal. Savant abilities appear in a small percentage of autistic people, but when they do, they usually show up in one very specific domain where the person performs at a level far beyond what's considered typical. One of the most well-known examples is mathematical calculation. Some autistic savants can perform huge number operations instantly, or determine the day of the week for any date in history without using formulas they can explain verbally. Another famous example is Stephen Wiltshire, who can look at a city skyline once and then draw it from memory with near-perfect detail and correct building proportions. There's also artistic savants who produce hyper-realistic drawings, paintings, or sculptures with little formal training. Others have memory-based savant skills, like recalling thousands of facts, maps, historical records, or long strings of numbers. What makes savant ability so striking is the combination of precision and speed. The skill isn't only advanced, it operates effortlessly. The brain forms a direct channel to that specific area, whether it's numbers, images, sounds, or patterns. Not every autistic person has a savant trait, but when it appears, it showcases what an extremely specialized cognitive system can do. It's a reminder that human intelligence comes in many forms, and some of them look almost superhuman when focused in one direction.